You're listening to ayahuascapodcast.com.
The idea that this psychedelic medicine and psychedelic therapy is rooted in these ancestral traditions with plant medicines and mushrooms, etc., is opening the door to allowing mystical experiences into the healthcare system. And ultimately, it's showing this relevance of the spiritual healing to modern health and well-being. So the book is about weaving those things together, showing that, hey, we're in this time frame when some ancestral people prophesied that we need to address the mind and the heart, the science and the spirit would need to come together. They would need to bridge. They would need to soar together for us to move forward. That if they don't, we're going to have more problems than we already have. And so that's one movement. And then the psychedelic research world has been, for the last 30 years, creating stronger and stronger arguments of how spiritual well-being, how relevant it is to people's healthcare, their mental health, and even to their physical health. So the book is about exploring that, but it's through stories from my own life and journeys, and trying to draw upon ancestral wisdom from indigenous traditions and also weave that into science and bridge it, and then tell the story of somebody who's just following their spiritual path, and trying to understand the kind of multi-dimensional mystery of life.
Hi guys, and welcome to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, we do the host Sam Believ. Today I'm having a conversation with Joe Tafur. Dr. Joe Tafur is a Colombian-American family physician, curandero, and author who bridges Western medicine with Amazonian plant spirit healing. After training in family medicine at UCLA and doing mind-body research at UCSD, he spent 6 years in the Peruvian Amazon at Niuerao Centro Espiritual, studying Shipibo Curanderismo. He is the author of Fellowship of the River and his new book, Medicine Song, Spiritual Healing and Psychedelic Renaissance, where he explores how spiritual healing, psychedelics, and modern science can come back into harmony. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you. Joe, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Sam. Nice to be back. Nice to be back on the show. Thanks for having me.
So yeah, that's second time I'm having Joe on. Last time it was about 2 years ago. It's you can watch it in episode number 34. So back then he was still writing the book about which we're going to talk today. So Joe, welcome back on, and tell us what's changed since the last time we spoke in your life.
Yeah, I think the main thing that's changed is, probably little things have changed, but is the book. Yeah, I released the book. That's what I was focused on, was releasing Medicine Song. And so it came out this year in July. So now I'm in the process of slowly promoting the book. And meanwhile, otherwise just digging in on my projects here in Phoenix, Arizona, and also there are other projects still going to Colombia, a little bit in Sasaima, and some trips to Peru. So all that's kind of the same, but now bringing this book and that kind of message out, and then slowly making my way here in Arizona towards probably more integrative medicine doctor work as well, and some psychedelic work with ketamine.
Yeah, that's actually was something I wanted to ask you. Given your history and everything you've done, do you see yourself more as a doctor or more as a curandero? Or if you were to assign percentages, where would you put it?
I don't know. I think that here in the States, and I would say it's I don't know, maybe like half and half,
50-50.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's accurate with the time, but in my heart, I would say it's something like that. Yeah.
Well, that's very, very good to hear. You're a busy man. You have projects all over the place in different parts. So I've, interestingly enough, when I was interviewing you last time, I didn't read your book yet, but after that, I've read the book, the Fellowship of the river, and it's a really great book. So I highly recommend listeners to check it out. It's like relatable, has some stories, and you kind of question many things. And I really enjoyed listening. I mean, I'm an audiobook kind of person, so, and I believe it's you reading it as well, right?
Yeah. No, I read it, and
Yeah.
then we have the new audiobook of Medicine Song, and I read it as well.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to check out your new book. So I will basically be that's the questions I'm going to ask, So tell us about your new book. What is, why did you need to write it? What was missing in the first book, and why should people check it out?
Well, the new book is about. So the old book was kind of about my journey as a doctor, getting involved with plant medicine and kind of making the case. I think trying to connect the dots medically to what I was observing there as a doctor in Peru, and seeing the plant medicine work. How I was helping people and kind of coming up with some theories, trying to relate spiritual healing to healing that could affect mental health or physical health. And so that was the focus. And then this book is about kind of tracking 3 decades in a way. Like it's stories. This book is mostly about stories. So people, they want stories, they like stories. And so trying to get people's attention through stories, but also to teach something. And so then I picked stories that are covering from my own personal life. In the first book, a lot of people were, sorry, I'm going to clear my throat. The first book was, a lot of people wanted to hear more stories, more of the mystical side of things. And so then I wanted to do something that was addressing that and speaking more about the kind of the relevance of the mystical side of healing work. And so I track over these 30 years of stories in my own life when kind of mystical things or mystical experiences happen to me, not necessarily because of plant medicine or psychedelics, but just from life. And then also some experiences that happen in ceremony or even in psychedelic therapy. So tracking those stories and how it kind of shaped the course of my journey, all the way to, the Church of the Eagle and the Condor and our work here in Arizona and the legal battle and all that kind of journey, but also tracking this prophecy of the Eagle and the Condor, an aversion from Peru that said that this last 30 years would be this big kind of change period, the 90s into the 2020s. And that's a very interesting time frame when so much has changed, and the internet came and the cell phone came and so many other advances in science and technology and quantum physics and artificial intelligence. It's a very interesting shifting period that was in a way anticipated by indigenous astrology, at least in Peru, and by other groups, suggesting this would be this big time. And that would be a very trying time and a difficult time where there would be so much disequilibrium in the ecosystem in the world, but also in the mental health of the human society. And that it would be some time when this eagle and the condor, and in this version, there are many other versions. In this version, the eagle is kind of, in a way, you could say, like the path of the mind. And the other one, the condor in this version, is kind of path of the heart, that they would have to come together. And so it's about science and spirit coming together. So during the same 30 years of this psychedelic renaissance is this overlaps, MAPS and the research. You were just at the MAPS conference. So in the 1990s, the first psychedelic research started. 2010 started publishing, 2010 to 2020 to now the psychedelic 20s, that they announced at MAPS. So within medicine, the idea that this psychedelic medicine and psychedelic therapies rooted in these ancestral traditions with plant medicines and mushrooms, etc., is opening the door to allowing mystical experiences into the healthcare system. And ultimately, it's showing this relevance of the spiritual healing to modern health and well-being. So the book is about weaving those things together, showing that, hey, we're in this time frame when some ancestral people prophesized that we need to address the mind and the heart, the science and the spirit would need to come together. They would need to bridge. They would need to soar together for us to move forward. That if they don't, we're going to have more problems than we already have. And so that's one movement. And then the psychedelic research world has been, for the last 30 years, creating stronger and stronger arguments of how spiritual well-being, how relevant it is to people's healthcare, their mental health, and even to their physical health. So the book is about exploring that, but it's through stories from my own life and journeys, and trying to draw upon ancestral wisdom from indigenous traditions, and also weave that into science and bridge it, and then tell the story of somebody who's just following their spiritual path, and trying to understand the kind of multi-dimensional mystery of life.
So you mentioned the spiritual well-being, with in the scientific world, you need to have numbers. So how does one measure someone's spiritual well-being, or how does one?
Yeah. So the spiritual it's been, there are a number of measures that psychological questionnaires that have been validated, and so they've been building their way up in medicine and medical research and psychological research to become established measures of spiritual well-being that have, in some cases, been correlated clinically to the way your body works. So they're starting to bridge that. You have psychological gratitude measures that have been correlated to inflammation in the blood. So you have spiritual well-being measures of different kinds. There's like a big questionnaire where they try to see people's kind of shift in their sense of meaning and purpose in their life. And then there's a further one that I think is a little broader. It's called the connectedness scale. That's come out of psychedelic research. And the connectedness scale is assessment through questions and questionnaire, but it's been linked to healthcare outcomes. So it's not just an idea. It's not like somebody's dogma. It's actually stuff that's tied to a kind of a reality, just a measurable reality. So maybe it's not so perfect, but it does trend in that way. So people's idea of their sense of connectedness with themselves, with their bodies, with their emotions, with their loved ones, with their community, with their society, with their ecosystem, and with the universe is a measurable number that it's a scale, the connectedness scale that's been validated and published, and shown that if you can shift connectedness in individuals, so let's say an ayahuasca ceremony or an ayahuasca retreat or in some kind of intervention, that it's a good prognosticator that you can probably show that may lead to long-term benefit. And so they follow those people out to say, is that in fact true? So that's using the research machine to assess this. So then all of a sudden this connectedness scale, maybe it's abstract, maybe it's just a psychological measure, but it does have some value, some measurable value that's related to healthcare outcomes. So that's an example of what has come out of the psychedelic research world that has been trying to understand what is it that these people are getting out of these experiences that is leading to this big change for them. So some of the research is showing, you could probably say something more simple, that they're shifting their emotional processing. They're able to process emotional experiences from their past in a different kind of way, that that has a connection to their biology, to the physical function of their body, and also to their psychology and how they're triggered or they're not triggered. And so what is it that's driving that, and what role does a bigger spiritual context, or at least a mystical context or a transcendent context, play in facilitating that kind of shift in somebody's being? And so that's, again, looks like the shifts in spiritual well-being from other studies. Again, there's a separate questionnaire. I could pull out the name. It's a complicated acronym, but it's a form of questionnaire that, again, it's like just mounting evidence. Say, okay, this is the one we're using. This is, and that's, as the research is published, you show everybody, this is the questionnaire, here's the questions, here's the scale, here's the history of the publication of this particular scale, and how what the evidence has been accumulating around this scale. So that's kind of how you assess it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more rooted in, like I said, a sense of connectedness, a sense of feeling, like I said, meaning and purpose. So what are the more universal concepts around spirituality? So it's not about, it's very much about the personal relationship, with the universe, with the transcendent, the mystical side of life.
Yeah, speaking of connection, one of the things you talk about is the importance of connection to nature, to in the process of healing. I don't know if you want to talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think that nature connectedness is one of the connectedness scales. That was before there was kind of the more broad connectedness scale, or maybe at the same time, but parallel. Some people had just focused on nature connectedness. So in the psychedelic therapy world, if you could, there was some research that had demonstrated that if you could promote more nature connectedness in the individual, that they would be more likely to heal. And so there's something there about this connection to nature. And so then there's a step further. There's different perspective. You could just be kind of psychological measure. Oh, I feel more connected to nature. But we would go a step further and say, well, that connectedness to nature, it's a resource. That there's a resource, that there's a metaphysical resource, that there's a spiritual relationship with the earth and with nature that provides guidance, that provides information, that provides peace, that is an example of how harmony could exist, within the ecosystem, how there could be a stable, sustainable equilibrium formed here on this earth. So nature is our example to understand that, the people that think that the world is an empty chaos, that nothing matters, everything's meaningless, there's no point to anything. And it's like, well, the forest, is somehow functioning on its own in some kind of rhythm and consciousness that many people across the world would, they acknowledge in some cultures, the divinity of that. There's a sacredness to the existence of that. And so then nature becomes an example of what a loving community looks like, in the sense that it can support, without judgment. So I think that nature and our connectedness to nature is something that most of the ancestral cultures around the world acknowledge as very important. Our spiritual relationship with nature. That I would argue that all the sustainable cultures that we're aware of, so meaning that they were able to coexist with intact ecosystems for maybe thousands of years, the only examples that we have of cultures that have done that are ones that somehow acknowledge their spiritual relationship with nature. That's integral. So a lot of the ancestral culture in Colombia, for example, are very focused on that they don't believe that you can achieve sustainability, that you will not come to a place where the rivers are clean where you live, until you acknowledge that there is a mystical side of life. There is a transcendent aspect to our existence. That the quantum physics and all the other physics, and just being alive and being honest, that there is a mystery that exists. So then addressing this and trying to find some kind of right relationship, how they call it, some kind of way to come into peace. And there's a lot of room for skepticism and questioning, but still moving in that direction, that's important, that's a value of yours, that's kind of necessary for the long-term health and outcome. Here I am in the United States, like the amount, we're really dealing with some heavy duty stuff here of the disrespect. They just something that's been going on for a long time. They just published something last week that, colorectal cancer, like high rates in young people, 30-year-olds, they said, well, they've been beating around the bush so long. Like, what is it? Why? Well, what could it be? And it's the ultra processed foods, and the lack of the, poisoning the environment constantly. And then the damage that it's causing, here on the development of the youth. It's a big issue here. That's a big mystery. Like what's going on with whether it's autism or these other things, like so much environmental contamination and kind of a disrespect over what it means to be in relationship with where you live. And there's immense suffering that is like bubbling up right now. It's very intense. That the healthcare system, it's like we probably cannot just deal with it. It's going to overwhelm the system, and we're just seeing it coming up now. So the concern is this, is this ignorance of these things, is it sustainable? And as far as we know, no, there's no reason to think that it would be. Like we have no argument that it would be. So then we're on the edge of that cliff, and here in this culture, I think we're really looking over the edge and seeing the way that's bleeding over into other parts of the world. And so it's just like, okay, how do we relate to nature? Here in North America, the tribes, the indigenous tribes, had a much different attitude towards, like we say, the creation, within the, let's say, the monotheistic religions, the Judaism, Christianity, for example, that the creation would be considered sacred. That it's not a piece of garbage for you to use up and throw away. And it's impractical, but there's some kind of deeper metaphysical consideration as well, in the mix there.
Yeah, U.S. is a very unhealthy place. I mean, the world is getting unhealthy, but U.S. is extra unhealthy. When I went to MAPS, and I've been there for a week, I felt terrible. Like just the food and something there, I felt were very ill. So you talk about, last 30 years from 90s, the psychedelic renaissance. How far along are we? Like, how's that, your analysis, how's that looking? How much is left for us till hopefully better times are coming, or maybe people embrace psychedelics more and other spiritual practices?
Yeah, it's further than ever, number one, like that we know of. And so in America, there was you were at the MAPS conference and the MDMA research that got, in America, that got denied. Like you said, this, what, for your, as a tourist, is feel like a very unhealthy culture, that you comment, and this culture that's dominated the industry is dominating the government. And so there's big questions around why was MDMA assisted therapy denied here when Australia said yes and Canada said yes. So they're moving forward. So thanks to the MAPS research conducted largely in the United States, Canada's moving forward with MDMA. Canada's also moving forward with some degree of psilocybin therapy. Australia is moving forward with MDMA with some degree of psilocybin therapy as well. Within the United States, there's this MDMA research, and the battle with the FDA continues to try to find approval of these treatments. Psilocybin has breakthrough therapy status, is in clinical research trials that are supposed to culminate in, a couple of years. And while they do that, it's been lending support to a lot of decriminalization movements that have allowed for mushrooms and other plant medicines to become decriminalized in a number of states, with even tracks towards therapeutic use within Colorado, in New Mexico, in Washington, in Oregon, for example. So that's growing. I mean, it's not going backwards. Even with the changing politics, it's not going backwards as far as we can tell. They just secured $50 million for ibogaine research in Texas, a very conservative part of the country. So at least here in the United States, we're seeing that because of this unhealthiness that you observe, that the suffering and the disease is so intense that they have to look for these kind of options. So I believe that we just keep moving forward towards making more psychedelic therapies and trauma-informed care available, including, more legal support for the sacred plant medicines. Since we brought our case across last year, there's been two other, after 15 years of no legal kind of permission for communities working with ayahuasca. Now, since we got past, there's two more, and then there's a few more that are coming. And so there's a lot more open-mindedness that's happening towards these things. And so I'm not sure how far we are. I mean, I guess I just see it keep growing and growing. In the United States, the psychedelic research is happening at all the top universities. I don't know of one that's like against doing this research. I'm not aware, And so how could it not grow? There's a resistance to it, but the growth continues. So it seems to continue growing. So I don't know. Ketamine is legal. And so trying to find the ketamine assisted therapy and create good examples within that practice, and to also confront the abuses that happen in that world. So that's happening. And so then meanwhile, I was in Brazil, and they have the cannabis medical conference, and then they want psychedelic research and plant medicine support at that conference, and that was this year in Colombia. I don't know. There's movements that are trying to encourage more psychedelic therapies. In Mexico, there's ibogaine treatments facilities where people are going. People go to Jamaica to do mushroom ceremonies. They're just more and more opportunities and more open-mindedness, I think, again and again. So I think it's going as fast as it can go.
This episode is sponsored by Loaira Ayahuasca Retreat. Most of you know Loaira if you've been listening to this podcast for a while. Some of you might have already been to Loaira before. For those who don't know us yet, we started Loaira 4 years ago. At Loaira, we combine authenticity, accessibility, and affordability. Loaira is currently highest rated ayahuasca retreat in South America, with more than 700 5-star reviews and an average rating of 5 stars. If you come to Loaira, you'll experience powerful, authentic ceremonies led by our indigenous shaman, Fernando, in a very beautiful venue just 1 hour south of Medellin, Colombia. We're surrounded by nature and have comforts like hot water, Wi-Fi. At Loaira, our team has guided more than 2,500 people through this life-changing transformation of ayahuasca experience. At the same time, we keep it very affordable. So whether you're coming for healing, clarity, or a deeper connection to yourself, Loaira is the best choice. If it is your first time drinking ayahuasca, you will love our 3.5-hour preparation course and integration support. All of that is included in price, as well as pickup from Medellin, accommodation, and ayahuasca. Visit loaira.com to book your retreat or learn more. Loaira, connect, heal, grow. LAWAYRA.com. Yeah, that's very promising to see. And you mentioned MDMA and ketamine and sort of new kind of psychedelics. I know you're grounded in the world of ayahuasca and sort of old kind of traditional psychedelics. So how do you see those both worlds coexisting? And what can both of those modalities learn from each other?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, not everyone is gonna to drink ayahuasca, nor should they. So it's like, how many people do you see at your center, I guess you see a lot of people, but it turns out there's way more people on the planet Earth. And as far as meeting the demand of the amount of suffering that exists is, it's really formidable. And so you're going to have multiple strategies. That's just a reality. And so within the United States, as I said, while, there's a few, sacred plant medicine, spiritual communities, including communities that work with ayahuasca, a few. There's underground use, I guess, and there's all this other stuff going on. But the MDMA psychotherapy is illegal. Psilocybin clinical work is very limited. Psilocybin spiritual ceremonial work is very limited. So ketamine, is the legal option that can grow freely to address the problem here, as an example, within the healthcare system, even potentially be paid for by the healthcare system one day. So, who's going to pay for all this? So it's so important to me that the options that are actually available to the society are there. Because if the society doesn't change at a larger scale, the problem is devastating. So that's the first thing. As far as what they can learn from each other, I think they can learn a lot from each other. And I think they are learning a lot from each other. And so I'm really interested in, and I am involved in teaching and bringing people to Colombia and to Peru to take psychedelic therapists who want to learn about ceremony and the spiritual context. Those people who are guiding people in clinical settings, even with ketamine or with psilocybin or with MDMA, like many times they encounter like spiritual phenomenon that happen, when you open up those portals and those spaces, and they're not getting a lot of guidance around how to address, this other mystical side of what we've been talking about. So you have the ancestral traditions that have a lot of experience to draw from. And so we're trying to connect those two areas so they can learn from that and learn from the guidance and draw upon that. And eventually, we see people here with ketamine, for example, including myself, bringing live ceremonial singing to those settings. That there are people who train and have experience and gifts in those areas. And why won't it eventually turn into that the way it is traditionally, not just recorded music, but also, shamanic or energetically conscious exchange. So that's beginning. It's in its early stages, but we're involved in that and trying to connect those two kind of ways. And then on the other side, from the science side, there's so much to be gained, that some of the ancestral traditions and the beauty and the magic of focusing maybe on the energetic side of things so much, but there's a lot of psychological knowledge to draw from, that's beneficial to the tribal people as well, and the kind of healing work they're working on with their own families. And so just drawing upon the experience of Western psychotherapy and Western science, and that there's just so much to learn about, how these things are interacting with the brain and the mind and the body. And it's useful, to recognize also people that might be more at risk, that, hey, this is something that's maybe not so safe to do. This isn't, maybe we should be more careful, like the medical screening side of people going to an ayahuasca a retreat or a retreat center that works with ayahuasca, for example. Like the Western diagnostics is huge in helping avoid problems in those settings, So there's a lot of knowledge to draw from.
Yeah, it's really cool to see that synergy, so to speak, and collaboration, if it happens this way, and the both sides take the best from each other while growing simultaneously. But yeah, what you're saying is correct. I've calculated that in order to give 8 billion people ayahuasca, you'd need to give 1 million people. You'd need to have a 1 million people ceremony every day for 30 years, which is obviously not possible and would not be enough at all, because, as you know, people would need to do it over and over again. So it is, I think, it forever is going to stay limited in, let's say, it's for the very special people or very interested people in it, because it's just hard. And you yourself, working at Nive Rao and seeing that format of retreat, you probably know how difficult it is also to organize and to make it happen, and how non-scalable it is from a strictly business point of view. You can't really scale that. Like, let's say we have a retreat, right, Lawira, and we do 3 retreats a month, and we host anywhere from 60 to 90 people every month, which is a lot. But yeah, if I wanted to, completely burn myself down to the ground, I could maybe start one or two more retreats. So that's a couple hundred people a month. But still, it's not enough to make a dent. However, another thing you touched on, I think that's where my personal hopes are from the point of view of spreading the medicine, is training the facilitators, because you said you want to bring people that serve the medicine, you want to train them in the more shamanic traditional approaches. And that's separately from that conversation, I came to the same conclusion, that it's necessary, because even if you're a psychiatrist, it doesn't mean that you know what to do in the ceremony from a spiritual point of view. And in the clinical setting, they don't really use all the tools that are used in traditional ceremony. And also there's a space, because most of the facilitation training programs in the US, they lack practical experience. It's all very technical. So I don't know how far along did you get in there, but if you ever want to collaborate, I would be more than happy to do something together, because we do have a lot of people, and there's a lot of opportunities to practice. But actually, this December we're doing a first ever retreat where people that, doctors and therapists that are coming, they can participate in the retreat. They pay a little extra, but there's a training program on top of that. I'm collaborating with a few people. Some of them I met at MAPS, and they will be able to do the retreat, learn, and also take that expense out of their taxes and learn continuous learning credits. So that's kind of my first attempt in that direction, because if we were able to get a lot of people, like they want to serve the medicine, not ayahuasca, but they want to work with ketamine or MDMA or whatever else gets legalized, and then we can train them in how to do the shamanic part, right, and the facilitation part. Because let's be honest, practicing on ayahuasca is the best way, because of how hard it is. And sitting in a ketamine clinic is much more difficult experience than being in an ayahuasca ceremony. It's just more intense. So yeah, do you have any thoughts about that? Any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's trying to do different things, and so I don't know what's harder or not harder. That's an opinion. That people might have different opinions about that kind of thing. But I think it's important to create those opportunities for those people that are getting into psychedelic therapy, and so yeah, I'm doing that myself, and like with these other, I got enough on my plate right now. I don't know about new projects or new collaborations. I'm just trying to keep the ones we're doing, trying to get those established and functioning. But I think it's really important to do it, but I don't think that, it's like, these are cultural shifts. And so the focus and the business model and scale up and all that is, supposedly because they're trying to address the big problem. But that's not why people really scale up. They're trying to make more money. That's why they scale up. And so I think that all these programs, like you said, trying to come up with ways to do it where it's sustainable, where it's like takes care of the workforce and not going to burn everybody out, and create examples. So that's going to take multiple people. So the idea is you create more examples. Look, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're helping. And hey, maybe you guys can do it too, and then you'll also help. But the idea that somebody needs to monopolize the whole thing, in order to get rich, I guess, would be the main reason. It just doesn't work out very well, as you mentioned, because it takes such much care, to do what we're trying to do. So it's like, this is kind of like not a completely capitalist model. And so that's part of the issue of the change. It's like, okay, are there small businesses and things that are sustainable, that do well enough, that can keep something going that they really feel good about and that they believe in? That it's not just about the venture capital. It has kind of already come and gone through psychedelics. They're the fantasy and the thrill of thinking, oh wow, this is such an exciting treatment, this is such a big treatment, we could get rich. All we have to do is, well, we already got rich from cannabis, or we already got rich from crypto. So they think, oh, all we do is just put our money into here, because they're so smart, because they made so much money so young, that they must be so intelligent. But then, as it turns out, when you get into the work that you're doing, you realize that it's like, yeah, it's very difficult. It's tough. It's not fun all the time. It's not just a thrill. It's not just a cheap vacation or whatever, or a luxury vacation. It's serious. It's heavy, and the profit margins aren't what you thought it was going to be. And so once that kind of reveals itself, they go away, because they were in it for the profit margin. There was a thrill around, oh my God, I got so high. Oh, wow, I saw so much. But really, like, what was boring was, oh, we're not making as much money as I thought we were going to make. So then they leave. And that's what we've seen a lot of. And so the idea that there would be investment in capital to scale up, there's few examples. There are examples of people that are pulling that off. It's so hard. It's so hard to maintain the integrity, around this kind of work, to keep it on track. And so I think that it's so important that there are good examples. And so the good examples means that before they think about scaling up, before they think about growing, that they get what they're doing stable, and otherwise there's really nothing to grow. And so that's what we're trying to get to. And I think it's a patient process.
Yeah. Well, it is an interesting topic for me personally, and forever topic. This balance between spirituality and helping people, and then the business. Because unfortunately, no matter how amazing we are and wanting to help people, we are still existing within this capitalist society. So it's kind of like you have to defeat it with its own tools. Because if you can't. I mean, at least for now, I have not figured out how to do something without making money. And then, like, from a strictly business point of view, it's like the people that solve the biggest problems are the people that make the most money. Like in a sort of,
is that true? Is that completely
sort of
true?
like idealizing it, but at least that's what a capitalist would say. So
Yeah.
Yeah, but with the retreat model, you can run a retreat, but it takes, as you say, so much love and care that the moment you try to spread your effort, it all falls apart. That's what it seems to me. But at the same time, like, I remember it was after the ceremony that I sat down and was like, wow, I feel so great. How can I get everyone else to feel the same way? And I made this calculation. I'm like, well, this is very difficult. So I hope somebody figures it out eventually, not to make a lot of money, but to help a lot of people, and hopefully make some money still, because
Of course. No, I think it has to be, like you say, you got to be profitable to be charitable. Paul Stamets always says that. And I think it's true. So you want it to be, profitable, and people deserve to make a living, doing what they're doing, especially trying to help. And so I'm all for that. And I think that's really important, and it won't sustain without that. It'll fade away, outcompeted by everything else that's out there. So I think it's really important, but I think it's the growth model, that people want to grow before they're ready because of the ambition. And that's the part that keeps falling apart. And we've seen it fall apart in the psychedelic world of multiple organizations that grew. I don't know. There's this Field Trip was a group that, I don't know. I'm not trying to trash Field Trip. I'm just saying they were planning to do ketamine retreats and all this stuff, and they tried to grow very, very fast. and they overextended and they fell out. It didn't work, and that's happened a few times now. There are a few retreat centers within the ayahuasca world that do expand and are able to create more environments, and so that does go on in those worlds. It's just, it's tricky. It's not so easy to do. So people are trying to do that, and I think it's just everything's changing. Everything's changing all the time, and so it's unstable. So then you're trying to find something that you enjoy, that you're able to sustain, that you feel good about, and then if you can grow it in an effort to help more people and also to be more successful, great. But I think the reality is just it's not a slam dunk. It's not just because, this was so big for me and for the people that I work with that, this is going to be huge, and we're going to run it so big. I say, like, for example, in America, the rehabs. There's the rehab business is it's so personal. It's so deeply personal, the work that they do with people, and you really don't see like a brand name growing in some big way across the country to be able to handle that. Like, it's not common in mental health care to see a large scale business behind it. It's something that's been difficult to maintain. And so maybe part of the nature of that. So then you have other formats, the people that really want to help. For example, you have people like Santo Daime, the Brazilian, where it's a church and they have a way of approaching the medicine and the community is not a capitalist model, and they've probably grown more than any other ayahuasca utilizing community. Then the old fashioned was not a capitalist model either, the tradition. They're just doing it as part of their spirituality. And it's spread across the whole Amazon. In that case, even that wasn't enough to fix everything, in those areas. So I think there'll be some element of it that'll grow beyond, the capitalist model. But a retreat center is a retreat center. I mean, you offer a special service. People are coming, they're staying, you're feeding them, you're taking care of them, you're translating for them. They can take a shower in the jungle, all these things. So it's a special service that you're offering people an immersion experience that I think warrants, its own business. But there will be, for the change to grow into the world, it'll have to extend beyond the business model.
Yeah, I agree. There's something else needs to be figured out, and I don't think it's been figured out before. That's something I think about a lot. But the church model is very interesting, and you mentioned Santo Daime, and not a business model. We're talking about a model of how to spread healing to far and wide. And obviously, you're a part of a church as well, right? The Eagle and Condor.
Yes.
Tell us more about that. Like, how does it look like? I've interviewed a few people that run psychedelic churches, and obviously, tell us about that. How does it look like? I only know this world, the retreat format or indigenous use. And also,
for us,
tell us
I think
about
our community, they don't like being put into this psychedelic church category because we feel like it's a sacred plant medicine tradition. So we're kind of like carrying on a tradition that we learned in Peru, and we continue in our connections to ancestral traditions in Colombia, and also our connections to ancestral traditions here in the United States with the Native Americans that are part of our community, and drawing upon those deeper traditions. And so then it's just a small scale. We're a small scale, community that just went through the big process to try to be legal. And we just are, we're starting from very little. So we don't have a lot of investment or anything. And so we're still kind of securing a location, and we've been just doing it in people's homes, and just very small scale kind of operation that's just very grassroots and focused on our community. So we're like, well, we just want to build out our community. We want to make sure that the people that we're offering the ceremony to are part of our community, and that we're going to be able to follow up with them and be aware of what's happening with them, and they don't just come and go, but that it's actually investing into, the future of the community and seeing, okay, what's the real, what really happens when you offer this to people within the same place, and over time, are they making progress or not? And so we're focused on that. And so we are also dedicated to honoring kind of the ancestral traditions, the indigenous traditions across cultures in the world, so not just obviously here in the Americas with the indigenous traditions, but encouraging our, members to learn more about their own ancestral culture and to honor ancestral culture that it was more connected to nature, that was more connected to spirituality, and bringing these things back online, and also encouraging the connection to health and well-being. That we feel like, okay, the spiritual practice, it has, there's potential therapeutic benefit of a spiritual practice. And so we're saying that if it is like genuine spiritual practice, that it should be therapeutic, that it should help your health and well-being, kind of how we started the discussion today. That it's like, if what we're doing is helping you, that it should be helping you at some level, like mentally or emotionally or spiritually, or maybe even physically. And that's, or in your relationships, with each other, with your family, etc. Like, that's what we're trying to help improve. So we're just trying to be an example, like I said, of like, we're not saying we have all the answers. We're not saying we figured it out. We haven't figured out the financial side of it. We haven't figured it out. But we think that we're trying to approach it with integrity and doing our best to address the issues and the concerns and the problems that come up. And like I said, share the example with the larger, so that other people will pick up and do something. The people are playing soccer all over the world, not just because obviously there's a huge business around soccer, but they just do it. People are playing music all over the world. There's big business around music, but that's not the only thing that's going on with music. So just letting these things grow from the ground up.
So how was were you able to get the exemption with the DEA?
Yeah, we did.
When was it?
We got it last year. Yeah, I think, or I don't know if it was last year or the year before. I think it was last year, I believe. We got the exemption. Yeah.
Congratulations. That's very exciting.
You. Yeah, we got it. Yeah, we sued the government, and they settled with us, out of court, and or settled. Well, the court was aware of the settlement, and so they settled, and part of the settlement was that we got our DA license. And so we've been renewed a couple times now, because there was a couple different processes. So now we've brought ayahuasca from Peru into the United States a few times, and we're legal. So that was what our fight was. Yeah, we fought to do that. And also, we're not responsible for everybody else, and they want to do it. It's like, okay, start your church, start your community, if you want to do it this way, if you want to bring it legally through South America, here's the path. And so 2 other churches have gotten it right after us. So we kind of broke the ice, and there's more behind them. And so we wanted to break the ice, and our argument was, this is a legitimate spiritual tradition. It should be treated like, under religious freedom. And so, the concern was that, the Santo Daime in the United States is considered legal, and same with the UDV, the Brazilian churches that are syncretic with the Christianity. And we're not against that, but they felt like the indigenous traditions, or the traditions that were drawing upon the more ancestral tradition, were not given the same respect. They were not given the same dignity, and we felt that was important to address. So we fought for that, and we got it. So that's a sign of a big change. And here in the US, like, I don't know, in my experience personally, for example, with the DEA, they've been very supportive, with the process. So it's a bureaucracy that maybe it's not the greatest to have to deal with, but it's not that bad. And we're moving forward. Yeah, so it's a big success for us, and it's the Church of the Eagle and the Condor in celebration of the prophecy.
Congratulations. I mean, it sounds like something very difficult to pull off. Suing the government, I mean, it sounds complex. So I'm happy you did it, because last time I was aware you were still in it. And so, yeah, it's very hopeful for the other people and churches, and legalization, or just change in the way people in US look at it at large as well through this process. So, yeah, we're almost wrapping up, but a few more things I'd want to talk about is you mentioned mystical experiences. If you want to talk about this, what happens when you work with the
Yeah.
medicines?
Well, I think that it's just that the idea of a mystical experience or some kind of experience that's like, I might shut this. Uh, there's different, well, obviously, when you're working at a retreat center who works with ayahuasca plant medicine, and the idea that, okay, so some mystical experiences are very relevant to what happens to them there. I think that's maybe not every time, but it's common that would play a role. And there was a publication here in the United States a couple years ago that also was presented at the previous maps on CERT experiences from Emory University, saying spiritual, existential, religious, or theological experiences, trying to give a broad. So that might feel spiritual to the person, or might be existential, like, challenging the meaning of the universe for them, or something of their life and death, their existence, or religious or theological, like their kind of understanding of these things. And so that these kind of experiences, they said, at least within the psychedelic therapy world, they said it's very common. When they observe and study everyone, they realize, I'm going to shut this just real quickly, just be a second. They realize that it's very common. If you were to ask people at your center, after a retreat, did you have a, non-ordinary experience? I think it would be a pretty high percentage, of people. So then they say in the same paper they published, they said, yeah, and then these CERT experiences, beyond, like, there was previously in the academic world a mystical experience with a questionnaire and a scale that was there. But they said with the CERT experiences, that they're very, they said these were really important in the person's, like, outcome, when they clinically relevant. So the person, if in their wellness journey, did they get better? Did they find therapy? Did they have spiritual healing from their process? It turns out that if they had this CERT experience, that a lot of times that was very relevant to their process. So it's the idea of a transcendent experience. If you look at the mystical questionnaire, you're talking about people having experiences where maybe they feel like they transcend, time and space, or they feel their ego dissolve, or they feel themselves come into, a union with the cosmos, with infinity, that they begin to feel this kind of gnosis of this knowing and a connection to some kind of inner healing intelligence, or maybe a connection to the intelligence of nature, what people call non-ordinary experiences. But that those could also take on, deeper kind of questions and understandings about what they find meaningful in their life, what they think is really, like, significant in their life, what they would consider, like, sacred in their priorities. Like, if I were to die without addressing this, that's a big deal. Like, what am I doing here in this life? So addressing those kind of things is really important in general, actually. But then with the sacred plant medicines and some of the psychedelic therapies, that some of these things are kind of brought into the forefront. That maybe the society, the culture is kind of burying these things, over material concerns, etc., that are real, but sometimes they might get carried away and they get, overly prioritized. And so then the person goes through their life and maybe they were really successful and they're, great capitalist and they got so rich and they have all the money and they have everything they wanted, but then they're not happy and they don't understand. And maybe they even become very unhappy. Maybe they become so depressed and lost that they want to kill themselves despite achieving everything that they were guided to achieve. So it's like, okay, well, what is that other element? What is that X factor that would have made them happier? How can they come to understand what that is? And is that happiness and that connection to some kind of deeper, kind of metaphysical understanding over the course of their life, does that actually improve their health? Not only will they feel better, but do they have less medical problems, less mental health problems? Do they bring more, joy into the world? Do they bring more goodness into the thing? Do they take better care of the nature and the world? So there's something there that the mystical side that if we're trying to understand the nature of existence and, our life on this planet, etc., that there's some, like I said, there's a mystical side of that. And so all the cultures all over the world have been, have all developed a lot of spiritual practices that are designed around helping people get in touch with that. And then if you're in a culture and a society where you've just been really closing the door to that, then sometimes plant medicine or psychedelic therapies can really help reopen you to something that you've been very disconnected from, that may actually just be part of the nature of reality.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for another episode. I think it was really great. I guess lastly, just tell the audience where to find you, your books, where you want to send them.
Yeah, so then the new book, the old book and the new book is available on Amazon.com and through Audible. You can get it. They also have it on ebook there. And then we have our activities, our retreats for the healthcare providers on modernspirit.org. And then I also have my own website, drjoetafur.com. So that's where you can learn more about our work.
Thank you, Joe. I guess I'll see you again when you write another book.
Thank you, Sam. Good luck with what you're doing.
Guys, you're listening to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, we do the host, Sam Believ, and I'll see you in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to support us and psychedelic renaissance at large, please follow us and leave us a like wherever it is you're listening. Share this episode with someone who will benefit from this information. Nothing in this podcast is intended as medical advice, and it is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you.